Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of TCN Presents the Cultured Pull List. In this episode, we are going to be continuing with the graphic novels that are inspiring the new DCU. So, we are now into Grant Morrison's Batman, and the book we're going to be covering is Batman the Black Glove. So, without further ado, let's just jump into it. Alrighty, hello everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So we are making our way through all of these, a lot of comics that James Gunn has brought up, saying that the DC is going to be based off of, or at least tonally. We've gone through All Star Superman and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Pretty sure that's it so far. So now we're making our way through Batman. We might cover more Batman down the line, but there's like so much Grant Morrison Batman. I think his run was like 6 years, and it spanned like Batman and Batman Incorporated and some other stuff.
Yeah.
So like as I was going through this, trying to like pick some stuff, I was like, wow, there's like a lot of stuff. But the Black Glove, I believe, is actually the image that James Gunn referenced in his like tweet, saying that these are the books that the DC is going to be based on. So I figured we covered this one first. And it is towards the beginning of his stint writing Batman. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So obviously Grant Morrison is the author. The artists for these, because this is a compilation of several different series, it's not necessarily one specific story. So there's quite a few artists and colorists and inkers. So the artists are J.H. Williams III, Tony S. Daniel, and Ryan Benjamin. And the colors and inks are by Tony S. Daniel, Sandu Floria, Jonathan Glapion, and Salim Crawford. And this book was released on September 2008. So, let's just jump into this first issue here. So, this first like Black Glove story in this book is kind of reminds me of like an Agatha Christie
I was
novel.
going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and with like Batman, which I think works really well for Batman, as like a mystery type story. But we start out just seeing this body hanging with this roulette table, I guess spinning, or this roulette, whatever you call it. And there's this monologue. You're not really sure who is saying it, but we assume it's, the person with the black gloves talking about how the Black Glove aims to deliver a deluxe service, a high stake experience at the very highest levels for its esteemed clientele. And that this weekend, the Black Glove is going to settle the age-old question, which is strongest, good or evil? And that's all we really get about the Black Glove for now, because we cut to Batman and Robin flying through a storm to get to this mysterious island they were invited to, which is apparently going to be a gathering of a bunch of kind of C-list heroes. We aren't really sure who they are yet.
Right.
But they are greeted, once they land, they're greeted by someone named the Knight, whose real name is Cyril Sheldrake. That's just easier because later we talk about his dad. So I'm just going to call him Cyril from now on. So Cyril, he is the one that meets them outside of the big mansion. And the way they're talking, it seems like Batman has been there before. And they used to be, this organization is definitely some sort of group that has met before. And it turns out that this is all sponsored by some guy named John Mayhew, and it's basically they call it the Club of Heroes, or Batman of all Nations, and it's made up of a bunch of people that were basically inspired by Batman.
Yeah, and a lot of these characters would go on to be Batman Incorporated as well.
Right, yeah, which was pretty interesting. This club is made up of Man of Bats and his sidekick Little Raven, who represents the USA and Sioux Indian I guess, side of things, because they're all across the world, so they all kind of represent. It's almost like a UN of Batman,
Right.
almost. So then we have all El Guacho from Argentina, the
Mhm.
Knight and his sidekick, the Squire from England, the Musketeer, who represents France, the Legionary from Italy, the Ranger or the Dark Ranger and his sidekick, the Scout, which we don't actually see Scout in this, but
Mhm.
he's from Australia. And then we have Wingman, who is from Sweden. And we go inside the mansion, and everyone else is there at this point. Only Batman, Robin, and the Knight aren't inside. But John Mayhew is nowhere to be seen, and the Knight explains to Batman and Robin that nobody's there. Like there was a buffet of food set out, but there's nobody there to greet us. We don't know where John is. We're not really
Mhm.
sure why we were brought here or anything, but we've kind of been waiting for Batman, and the people inside don't think Batman's gonna show up. I think
Right.
the only person who does is Del Guacho, because he thinks he hears the bat jet, and everyone else is like, "How are you supposed to hear it? It's a stealth jet." But he still thinks he's going to show up. But this wingman guy, who is a raging dick, he basically, like, everyone else there acknowledges that Batman inspired them, but he's like, no, no, no. I started this whole wingman thing like a year before Batman showed up,
Mhm.
and he doesn't think Batman's gonna show, and he's just like very adversarial and not a very nice person.
Mhm.
Everyone else is kind of getting along for the most part, but he's just kind of being a stick in the mud. But Batman does actually show up and surprises everybody there,
Mhm.
and just says, "Gentlemen, shall we find out why we're here?" So they all sit down at a table. There's seats laid out for them, and a video starts playing on a big screen, and it's basically somebody who seems to be John Mayhew at first, but then as the person looks up, it becomes apparent that it's somebody wearing John Mayhew's face,
Mhm.
which is it's nice. And
Yeah.
he basically says that, well, first of all, I did forget to kind of give a little bit of an intro of John Mayhew, but he was apparently some billionaire daredevil. He did a lot of stuff like shark hunting and just like a bunch of crazy stuff, and even directed a movie called The Black Glove, which isn't
Mhm.
really stated. It's just kind of they show the movie poster.
Right.
But he brought together and sponsored this club, this club of heroes, and yeah. So the video starts playing on the screen, and we see somebody wearing John Mayhew's face, and he claims that he killed John Mayhew, and he challenges the heroes to solve the murder. And he says, "Place your bets. The black glove points at you. By this time tomorrow, you will all be dead." And yeah, they all freak out and they all run outside, pretty much, except for um, what is the legionary.
Mhm.
He, I guess, wanders off by himself, but they all run outside, but all of their vehicles, boats, planes, whatever, simultaneously explode,
Mhm.
trapping them on the island. And then
Right.
we cut to Legionary, who had found a surveillance room, and he thinks he found which room that video was recorded in. But
Mhm.
as he's looking at the monitors, somebody comes up behind him and starts stabbing him with a bunch of knives. And like for a split second there, Legionary kind of, because you can see in the background his younger self.
Right.
It was kind of made pretty clear throughout this that he kind of let himself go, and
Mhm.
definitely wasn't in fighting shape that he used to be. But for a split second there, it seems like he kind of gets a bit of a glimpse of his younger self and fights back.
Mhm.
But it doesn't help too much because he succumbs to his wounds, because the guy stabbed him, I think it's supposed to be like 23 times, like
Right.
Julius Caesar.
Mhm.
So it was very methodical the way
Right.
this was played out. But yeah, that's the end of that issue. We just see him die. And then the next issue starts out with a flashback, which is kind of cool. They tried to emulate the style of like
Mhm.
50s, 60s comic books,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool. And they actually, I thought I had the photo, but I can't find it. But there is this one picture that shows the club together at their first meeting, and it
Mhm.
shows Batman and Robin in their old like golden age
Yeah.
suits, which I think is kind of cool that they made that canon. That was like their original
Mhm.
look, which is hinted at in some comics, but some comics, make it seem like he had a modern suit from the beginning.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of fun. But this flashback shows the second meeting where Batman fails to show up, and the Knight, who is actually Cyril's father, Percival. At this point, Cyril, the current Knight, is his dad's sidekick. Percival goes up to John Mayhew and starts accusing him of stuff, and the Legionary kind of gets in the way, and a fight kind of erupts between the Legionary and the Knight, and that's pretty much how that flashback is left for now. But then Batman and the other heroes go back inside, and they find Legionary's body on the table that they were sitting at while the video played. And Wingman basically kind of starts an argument at this point, kind of saying like all of us are suspects, but Batman kind of ignores him and goes, and he actually finds the monitor room where Legionary was actually killed. And he finds like chicken grease on the monitor, which is apparently Legionary left it there on purpose so that they could find the room that the video was taken, which turns out to be the library. So Batman goes to the library with the Squire and actually, I'm pretty sure it's just Batman and Robin, but it's not really important detail. But they find the Knight, Cyril, and he's in pretty bad shape. Apparently, some big guy came in and forced him to eat something. So Batman takes the Knight to the main hall where everyone else is congregated, and Man of Bats, who is apparently a doctor, takes a look at him, and he figures out that the guy made him swallow a bomb, which is not great for anyone. So also at this point, Batman remarks that the Legionary's arch nemesis would commit Roman-themed crimes. So it seems like at the very least, it's made to look like Legionary's enemy killed him. But Batman gathers a bunch. Oh, what did something fall?
The books I had behind me fell over.
Oh, geez. Oh, well, yeah.
Don't worry about it.
That's Gotta love it when your background attacks you.
Yeah.
So Batman gathers most of the other heroes, and they start heading back to the library because Batman thinks he noticed that there's no light source on the wall where they're supposed to be, at least according to the video. There was like a light source shining on the person, but so he goes back with the heroes to the library. But on their way there's some armored suits in the hallway, and those spring to life and start shooting at everybody with seems like they have like automatic submachine gun lances. Which I don't think is period accurate, but whatever. So Batman and the other heroes manage to defend themselves, but the door to the library, there's like this big iron door to the library that starts sliding downwards, and Robin and Squire manage to slide underneath and get inside the library, where Robin kind of continues investigating what Batman thought about the light source, and he actually finds a secret button on the globe in the library, which opens up a false wall or a false bookshelf on the wall, which also leads to a staircase which goes downward, pretty much like a classic castle. It seems like. So Squire and Robin start heading down the stairs, and it seems like Squire sees Red Raven, but then we cut back to Batman and Musketeer and all the others fighting the armor and dispatching all of the armor. And at this point, the only hero not there is Wingman, because Ranger showed up to help them. So, and of course, Knight and Man of Bats are still in the main hall because, he still has a bomb in him. So, but soon after they defeat the armor, Ranger starts trying to open the iron door to the library with his plasma pistol, which is taking a while. And while this happens, Musketeer is almost attacked by this robotic scorpion,
Right.
Which El Guacho says is the calling card of the assassin Scorpiana, but he says that those robots were made by another villain called like El Sombrero, I think, which is like the most like basic, no, might as well call him like Quesadilla Man or something. But
yeah, exactly.
yeah. Can definitely tell a white guy wrote this story, but but like it, no, it's fun. But so at this point, they make it through the iron door. Ranger cuts it open, and who do they see but Wingman, or more accurately, Wingman's body? And it looks like he's been hanged by the neck, just hanging there from the rafters, and his face is all messed up. And there is like this voiceover, which seems like it's voice played over loudspeakers throughout the mansion. And it says, the Black Glove has given you, has chosen you to represent good in a contest of good versus evil. We have your children, advantage evil. And Batman says, oh, I don't think so. And that's how that ends. So then we go to the next issue, where we go back to this flashback from the second meeting of the Club of Heroes. Squire, young Cyril, attacks Legionary to kind of save his dad, and his dad continues going after John Mayhew, saying, you killed her. And eventually they pull the night off of John Mayhew. But in conversations between Batman and some of the other heroes, we get the impression that after this altercation, the Knight was never the same as Cyril's dad, and kind of like lost his morale to be a hero. Right. So, and we're not really sure at this point what he's talking about. You killed her and everything. So then we cut back to Man of Bats and Knight. Man of Bats is trying to get Knight to throw up, Cyril to throw up, but it doesn't work because there is a barb on the bomb.
Right.
So it keeps getting caught. So Man of Bats decides that he's going to actually have to cut open Cyril to get the bomb out. So he does. He makes the incision, but right when he does, Musketeer shows up and to tell Man of Bats that the bad guys have his son, Red. Red Raven? But then Musketeer sees him just cutting open the Knight, and he thinks he's trying to kill him. He thinks that Man of Bats is the killer. So there's like a brief fight between them, but Man of Bats wins, and he manages to get the bomb out of Cyril. But then the bomb goes off like right when he gets it out. So it seems like, and El Guacho loses communication with Musketeer, so it's not clear if they made it out of that explosion or not.
Right.
But at this time, Batman, Ranger, and El Guacho are heading down those steps that Robin found in the library. And Batman stoops down and finds Robin's logo from his suit that was clearly ripped or cut from his suit. He finds that on the ground. And then, also I did forget to mention that one of Wingman's villains, Batman mentions, I think, in this scene that one of Wingman's villains was named like King Kraken, and he used this electric rifle. Right. And so it seems like at the very least, Kraken was framed for Wingman's murder if he didn't do it. But it's not clear at this point. But after Batman finds the Robin symbol, El Guacho, who was standing behind him, gets shot. And before we see the conclusion of that, we what the heck? We end up seeing I don't have a photo for that. I thought I did, but Red Raven is being suspended over he's in a tank filled with piranhas at the bottom, and he's being like suspended upside down. And Robin and Squire are being forced to like hold on to these bars suspended above their heads to keep him from falling into the piranha. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's the piranha swarm. And they're being held there by El Sombrero. Right. Kind of like El Guacho thought, but Then we cut back to Batman, who turns to El Ranger, the Dark Ranger, and actually starts calling him Wingman, and says, you did a pretty good job remembering that Ranger was a little left-handed. You've been, pretending to be left-handed, but I know your instinct is going to be right-handed. And right as he says that, he throws the Robin symbol at Ranger, who catches it with his right hand, pretty much confirming that it's actually Wingman in Ranger's costume.
Right.
So he and Batman start fighting, and Wingman in Ranger's costume almost gets it's not really said explicitly, but it's suggested, pretty strongly that Wingman killed Ranger and switched costumes, basically. So the corpse in the library was actually Ranger.
Right.
And Wingman is, now pretending to be Ranger and shot El Guacho. So he and Batman fight. Wingman almost escapes with Ranger's jetpack, but Batman manages to grapple onto him and they end up crashing. But Ranger still manages to almost get the upper hand. He's got Batman by the throat and got a knife held to his eyes, saying, I'll stab out your eyes. But then El Guacho, who is injured but not totally out of the fight yet, he throws a balo around Ranger. Well, I keep saying Ranger, but it's Wingman. Around Wingman's throat, and basically distracts him enough for Batman to get the upper hand and defeat Wingman. And Wingman, basically his motivation for all this, he says the Club of Heroes was his big break to become a famous hero and be able to do things on his terms. And Batman ruined it by not showing up to the meeting, basically, and basically blaming him for the Club disbanding. And it was revealed earlier that Wingman trained under Batman for a year.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how Batman knew that Wingman wouldn't have been killed that easily. He knew that he was pretty smart enough that he, agreed to train him for a year. So that was at least one of his first clues that something wasn't right. But Wingman kind of goes on for a while about how, you arrogant bastard, you ruined everything, yada, yada. And Batman basically says, you don't get it. We don't do what we do for fame.
Right.
And, that. But then we cut back to the whole Piranha Tank situation, and Robin takes the full weight of Red Raven, so that Squire can take out her slingshot and break the glass, but he almost lets go before Man of Bat shows up. And honestly, he just grabs both handles and just two hands it, which was kind of cool. And shows that he survived the bomb blast. So it's presumably so did Knight and Musketeer.
Right.
So Squire manages to break the glass and save Red Raven. But then we cut back to Wingman still trying to ream out Batman, even though he's been defeated. But then a bullet goes right through the middle of his forehead, and it seems like it was El Sombrero who shot him. And El Sombrero hops into a plane that was in this cave they've been standing in this whole time. And he starts to escape, but Batman manages to grapple onto the plane and climb aboard. And turns out El Sombrero is actually John Mayhew in disguise. Right. John Mayhew has been alive this whole time. And it's basically suggested that he's just this rich billionaire who, he's basically doing all this. He wants Batman dead because he does blame Batman for the club disbanding as well.
Right.
But at the same time, he just kind of wants to do this for thrills. It seems like it doesn't, Batman doesn't come out and say this. Is not clear if he puts all this together, but it seems like John Mayhew hired the Black Glove to put this whole, to basically put on a murderous murder mystery party almost.
Right.
But kind of a battle between good and evil, and it seems like John Mayhew and Wingman are on evil side, and all the rest of the heroes are on the side of good. And it seems like they even place bets on who's going to win and everything. And there's actually this really interesting quote that I found really funny, because Batman says incredulously, like, "You're doing all this for thrills." And then Mayhew says to him, "Money changes everything. That's what you'll never understand. People like me live lives beyond the law, beyond morality." And it's just kind of funny that he's saying this to, Batman, who's one of the richest people in the DC universe. Kind of funny that he just kind of assumes that it's money, just kind of justifying his actions when really he's just a bad person. So then we get to the end, and John Mayhew manages to use an ejector seat to launch himself out of the airplane and lands in the water and swims to shore. Batman manages to get a hold of the airplane and pick up the rest of the heroes and escape from the island because it's rigged to explode. So John Mayhew climbs back onto the island. He doesn't seem to know that it's gonna, it's rigged to explode. We see a countdown, and we hear whoever from the Black Glove is talking to John Mayhew. He says, in today's contest between good and evil, you gambled on evil, John Mayhew. You lost, and yeah, basically sealing his fate. So the island explodes. John Mayhew explodes with it, and all the heroes escape in that airplane. And that is pretty much how it's left. So kind of an abrupt ending, but yeah, that's the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to take on the rest of these? The other half of this book isn't really related to the Black Glove, but these are all in the Black Glove book. So we're covering those too. So if you want to take over, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so it kind of skips over a couple of issues where there's like a Ra's al Ghul thing, but this is like the next story arc, and then there's a one shot. But basically, the next story is Batman. He's fighting someone called the Third Man, and so we'll figure out who he is as we go along. But I'll start with issue 672. The Third Man, he shows up at the Gotham police station, and he's asking for somebody named Commissioner Vane. And obviously, James Gordon is the commissioner, so he's like, Vane's not here, I'm the commissioner. And so basically, the Third Man takes the commissioner captive, and he for ransom. Basically, like, I need to talk to Batman. And then he starts out with the police officer. Then Commissioner Gordon shows up, and he leaves the police officer and takes Gordon instead.
Yeah.
And then we cut.
Yeah, and this guy is dressed like almost exactly like Batman.
Right. And then we cut to Bruce, who is, he's base jumping with a supermodel from like a hot air balloon. And then right as they jump from the hot air balloon, there's the bat signal. And so he kind of figures out a way to like get separated from her. And then he lands in a back alley. But there's this cool shot that I don't know if I got a picture of it or not. But as he's like falling, he like switches into the Batman suit. It's really cool. Anyway, I think that might have been it.
I think he's landing on.
Oh, that's right. No, it's similar to that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then he gets to the police station, and then he's like on a roof, and he's fighting with the third. That's it, right?
Oh there. Yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah,
and
There's a really cool shot.
Yeah,
or I guess it's technically picture or drawing. What? Yeah, what do you call it?
Yeah. And then he's fighting, and then he mentions something like, "I've only ever seen you in a dream," which like this story gets really weird. But remember that. And then
I was really confused reading this for a hot second.
Right. And then I don't remember. I didn't take any notes, but somehow he has like a heart attack or something.
Yeah. The Third Man guy shoots him.
That's right.
With like some, I think it's like an explosive round or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like right in the chest.
Yeah.
Which
he has a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then like as he's having a heart attack, like it goes inside of his mind, and there's like this big bat, and you see him like writing Zurich and R, which is not necessarily important for this story, but for like the wider
Hmm.
Frank Morrison Batman. That's kind of really important.
Yeah.
And then it kind of ends with Batmite saying something. Yeah, you're in trouble, Bruce. And this is like the end. Like, is Batman dead? He's not dead, but
No, no,
um,
of course not.
and so this is the really trippy issue. So
Yeah.
basically, like, it's mentioned that a long time ago, he he went through two like experiments. One was this sort of ritualistic meditation thing where you like isolate yourself
Hmm.
for a month. And then there was another one where it was like 10 days in a total isolation, like a sensory deprivation tank, basically.
Hmm.
And through in those two times had some sort of impact on Batman's mind, but we can't really grasp it, although we kind of like
Yeah.
go around it or whatever. Um and so yeah, and then basically it kind of flashes back to the first time Batman was Batman, or presumably, because he's tracking down Joe Chill.
Hmm.
And and he talks about keeping a record, which kind of what Robert Pattinson did in his movie.
Oh
um
yeah, yeah. I thought that was interesting.
yeah, and then it cuts to Batman talking to a Robin. We're not exactly sure which one. um that's in a later issue.
Oh, of
But
course.
yeah. Yeah, so I don't know exactly which one, but he talks about how he's afraid of losing a Robin. So like in my
Oh
notes,
yeah, yeah,
I thought it was Jason, but it might have been Tim or it might have been Dick. I don't know.
yeah,
But he's talking to a Robin. He's like, I don't want to die. Yeah, I think it's that one.
yeah,
Oh, keeping Tim's at arm's length. So I guess it's Tim.
yeah.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So it's Tim Drake,
Well, I
and
think Jason already died,
yeah,
and
yes,
because
yes,
he says I'm scared for him to get too close in case I lose him too.
yeah, yeah. And then he's like talking to a a doctor scientist guy who we find out
Yeah.
later is Simon Hurt, which is he's just like a super villain. I don't know if he's related to William Hurt at all, but it's
Yeah, probably not.
yeah. I mean, William Hurt he's like Bruce Wayne's ancestor from like the colonial times, and so
Wait,
he's like,
really?
yeah.
Because that's an actor too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He's the guy that played General Ross in the MCU.
Oh,
He passed away, I think, a year or two ago. But yeah,
no, yeah, I'm pretty sure that
so I thought you were kidding right now. I'm like,
no. There's a character named
that's
William Hurt,
hilarious.
and this character in this book is called Simon Hurt, so I don't know if they're connected at
Oh,
all.
I mean, maybe, yeah,
Um, but yeah, anyway, so it's just like flashing around and it's super weird, and there's like
yeah.
um Batman reveals to Joe Chill that like he was Bruce Wayne, and so Joe Chill's freaking out
Hmm.
because everyone's mad at him for essentially creating Batman.
Yeah,
Um, and then Batman is resuscitated by the third man
yeah,
in like this weird bunker area,
yeah.
and it's important for later, but the third man mentions that he was technically dead for 4 minutes.
Hmm.
um yeah, and then it kind of ends with like all of these things flashing together, cutting back and forth at the same time. This issue is really weird. It's really hard to explain without having someone read it, I feel
Yeah,
like.
it's kind of like a fever dream,
Yeah,
honestly, which I think is kind of the
yeah,
point, but it was also really hard to follow.
right, exactly. Now we're into the next issue, 374. Yeah, Batman was dead for 4 minutes. The third man then describes that what there was this the Gotham Police Department put on this program basically that in case
Yeah.
Batman died, they would train a new Batman.
Hmm.
And this experiment was put on by the same doctor, Simon Hurt.
Yeah.
And basically, he's like, only three of you are going to survive. And then the third man was obviously the third person to survive. But we see later
Yeah.
that there's like three of them. One of them's like a Bane Batman. I don't know about the second one, but
Yeah.
then there's this guy. And apparently, like Batman fought them before, but he thought it was like a dream or something. But it's apparently, at least some of it was rooted in reality. He might have had a dream as well, but I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then he flashes back. He passes out. He blacks out for a second, and then he flashes back to a time when Dick was Robin, and they're like on the docks, and he's like, "What's happening? What's happening to me?" And then the cops are looking for him, and like Batman basically gets the third man to kind of just monologue for a minute while he's gathering all this stuff together because he
Yeah.
realizes, well, if I was dead for 4 minutes, then I can't be too far from the
Right. The
police department.
roof. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so he eventually pieces it together that this was the same location that he went into the sensory deprivation tank. And he's like, oh, okay.
Oh,
We're in the police
yeah, and
department
the
basement.
I'm pretty sure he says like during a flashback he did it to like simulate basically losing his mind so he can
Right.
kind of have an idea what Joker like in into the
Exactly.
mind of the Joker, which I thought was kind
Yes.
of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the third man basically says everything is right here in this file and he burns it.
Hmm.
And then he goes to like cut Batman's arm off, but somehow he like pulled his arm out of his sleeve. And then as he cuts it off, it's like hollow, and then he punches him.
Okay, yeah, so we can see
Yeah.
him without his
And then
sleeve.
yeah, and then they fight, and then he ends up defeating the third man, and that's right when all the police people show up, and they
Hmm.
were preventing James Gordon from going down there because during this whole Batman police program thing, James that was like a temporary thing where James wasn't the
Oh,
commissioner, so he didn't know about this, but the other commissioner, Commissioner Vane, did.
Vane. Okay, yeah,
And so
yeah.
all the other cops are trying to hide this from Jim Gordon, but he eventually figures out. And after
Gotcha.
they defeat the third man, they go down to the basement and they get Batman out. But then there's like a chase, and the third man finally gets away.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yeah,
here's the
right.
cop showing up and
Mhm.
what was this? Was this
I think that was the one who was the Bane.
Oh, okay. And
So
it's
he, yeah,
yeah, I forget. Yeah, but yeah, it's um that's him punching the
right.
and then yeah, where's I know I have a pic of him fighting the big dude. Oh yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
there it is. Yeah, he even
Bane
has like a
Batman.
Bane disc. Yeah,
Yeah. So
right.
yeah, then there's him escaping the cops and then there's the third man, yeah,
Yeah,
escaping for real.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the final issue of this collection is basically a one shot.
Hmm.
675 is Batman. It opens with Nightwing and Tim. They're fighting like dog bandits or something. They don't show the dog bandits, but there's like a panel where they're talking about like Tim's like we're better than fighting dog bandits. What's going on? Um,
Okay.
but as this is happening, Bruce is on a date with the same model he went base jumping
Yeah,
with in the
she's
earlier.
also like a activist or something. So
Yeah.
like she uses a lot of her money for like social causes and stuff.
Yeah, so he's on a date. She gets kind of mad at him because he's always disappearing and stuff.
Ah,
And then the waiter just kind of passes out, and there's this assassin guy. I don't even know who his name is, but he has like eyes on his fingers or whatever.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that guy. Um, and he's basically there to kidnap not Bruce Wayne, but the date for some reason. And then we cut to Talia al Ghul, Damian Wayne, and then Merlin, who is
Hmm.
the Dark Archer from Arrow.
Oh
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Um, and they're training and they're talking about the date, and so we're kind of led to believe
Hmm.
that Talia is the person who's in charge of this whole thing. But this whoever the guy with the eyes on his fingers, he's not related to Talia at all because she's kind of surprised that someone else is
Okay.
kidnapping her as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and then we cut back to Nightwing and Tim. They're fighting some guy that looks like Firefly, and they see like, oh, the building over there is
Oh.
smoking. They're like, oh, hey, that's the same building that Bruce is in. So they go to rescue him, but like as this kidnapped guy is kidnapping the date, the lights go out, and then that's when Bruce gets his opportunity to like beat the
Mm,
crap out of him.
yeah.
And then the date's like, oh shit, and like Bruce is like, yeah, you're right. Bruce Wayne is like just a mask. I'm actually Batman.
Mm,
And
interesting.
during all this, Nightwing and Tim briefly bring up the whole like isolation thing we were talking about earlier. So
Oh,
apparently that's really important to the overall Grant Morrison Batman arc because they keep bringing it up a lot.
right.
Yeah, and then this is when it's revealed that Talia is not actually behind the kidnapping.
What are your thoughts on like this and I guess just Grant Morrison's Batman as a whole? Like I know like there's still a lot more than this, but like what are like have you read much of Grant Morrison's Batman before?
I read some Batman from this era.
Yeah.
It was the Battle for the Cowl. I don't know if
Oh
that
yeah.
was him or not.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was one that I read a couple years ago that I really liked.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I really like this one as well
Hmm.
for the most part. Yeah, it's probably my favorite of the DCEU ones, the DCU ones we read so far.
Yeah.
I really wish they did more with the first story, because it seems like it was really
Yeah,
rushed. It was really interesting. I like we talked about
it
before we
could have done
recorded it.
another issue.
Yeah, it feels like an Agatha Christie story, which is really cool.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I really like it. It goes into some weird places, but you know, I really enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, yeah. Like which do you prefer? Like the first story, like the actual Black Glove story, or the other one with like the third man?
Definitely the Black Glove story, although the
Yeah,
idea of the third man is very interesting too.
yeah, yeah. I think so too. I think for me, honestly, like when I think of like Batman from the comics, like obviously, there's like the classic versions, but for me, the one I usually picture is probably like around this era.
Mhm.
So this is kind of like, Grant Morrison. Like I'm not necessarily talking about only these stories, but I think
Right.
Grant Morrison's Batman is kind of like the ideal comic Batman in my,
Mhm.
that's like the one I think of when I think
Sure.
of comic Batman. So I really like what he does with the Dark Knight. Like, going through all of the stuff that he wrote, it's very clear that, I mean, I haven't read all of it, but it's very clear that he definitely doesn't go in halfway. Like
Right.
he seems to have like this like long freaking arc. Like the whole
Mhm.
thing almost is like one long arc. There aren't very many, like even the
Yeah.
one shots are connected,
Yeah, I
you
was
know.
watching a video earlier today. It was basically talking about how like his Batman stuff and then Batman Incorporated, Batman and Son, and even the Justice League kind of all tie together into one big story about like Batman.
Right. Right, which is like is really hard to like cover all that. So
Right.
when I was trying to like when we were trying to choose which story to go to do, I was like, wow, you can't really
Right.
there isn't really like just a chunk of like three stories that or
Mhm.
three issues that go together so much.
Right.
They
Right.
all lead to something else. Like I was considering doing the Batman Incorporated or part of the Batman Incorporated run,
Mhm.
but as I was going through the issues, I'm like, well, this is just like a 20 issue whole arc that you have to like read the first one to get all this.
Right.
So this is probably the most like standalone stories that he's
Mhm.
done in his run.
Mhm.
But yeah, I really liked the Black Glove one. I kind of wish they'd done more with the actual Black Glove
Yeah.
like organization. Maybe that's in another story, but as far as I know, like I don't
Yeah, I
think it
was doing a little
is.
bit of research. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere else.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, and like what you said, I kind of wish they'd
Mhm.
done more with the whole
Right.
Black Glove
Mhm.
organization. But I really liked the story; felt very
Yeah.
murder mystery, like who done it kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Um, it was a little bit confusing, but I think mainly just because there was so much going on, like there's so many details in it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like this story would like adapt would be a really cool like movie adaptation, either
Right.
animated or live action.
Right.
Um, yeah, I thought that was very cool. It was one of I think like Batman and detective mystery stories just go like hand in hand so well. So
Mhm.
it's always fun to see a Batman mystery story.
Right.
And yeah, I really do like Grant Morrison's writing.
Mhm.
It's very complex, I would say,
Yeah.
which sometimes makes it hard to follow,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I think it makes for more interesting stories.
Right.
And I loved all the art for all of these
Mm.
issues. Like all the
Yeah.
artists did a super good job.
Right.
And I just love the way they make Batman look. Like in all
Mm.
of these issues, like he just looks really imposing and really cool.
Right.
And I really like the classic blue and gray.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of wish they do something like that with the new Batman
Mhm.
in The Brave and the Bold. They kind of bring that dark blue in there.
Yeah.
That would be kind of cool. But I'm honestly really glad they're adapting Grant Morrison's Batman. I'm not sure like if they're
Mhm.
going to pick from a certain run, like a certain
Right.
story, or if they're just if anything they might go for like the Batman and Son story where they
Mhm.
first introduced Damian Wayne. But
Right.
I am really glad they're adapting Grant Morrison's run because his run is super cool and
Mhm.
has like so many just cool stories in it, so many things that you could adapt. Like I'm really
Right.
surprised they haven't adapted any of his stories sooner. I guess because they're a little
Mhm.
newer.
Yeah.
They're from like 2006 on. I
Mhm.
think from like
Yeah.
2006 to 2012, I think.
Mhm.
But I'm surprised they haven't adapted more. Like they're just like some of the coolest storylines that like I can think of come from his run, like the Batman
Right.
Incorporated run, that's really cool because it's, you know, the Bat family plus a bunch of other Bat heroes. But yeah, I kind of got off topic here because I haven't really talked about the second half. I thought the second half was pretty good, though. Like that, it was definitely very confusing. Like it didn't really make a whole lot of sense until you read the whole thing. But once you get to the end, you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, you know. But I can't even imagine reading these as they came out, like one issue at a time. I'd be so lost, you know, because like that first issue with the third man is like kind of confusing because Batman acts like he knows him, but from a dream, all that stuff. So and then there's like that fever dream one that's like really confusing, but kind of interesting, you know, in a way, but probably like my least favorite out of that story. But yeah, overall, really cool. I look forward to reading more Grant Morrison. We'll probably, I'm sure on the show down the line, we'll talk probably more about like Batman Incorporated, Batman and Son, and a few other ones. I mean, if there's any Grant Morrison storylines you want us to cover, leave a comment down below and we'll get to them at some point. But we still have to go through all the other DCU ones like Swamp Thing and the Authority and all that stuff. So, but we'll circle back to Batman eventually.
For sure.
Yeah. So before we wrap up this episode, let's do the segment, Our Cultured Picks, where we talk about some single comic issues we've been reading recently that are worth talking about, but don't warrant a whole episode. So mine is going to be Superman #1, which just came out. I wasn't really sure about this one going into it. I saw like it was selling out a lot of places, but my local comic shop had quite a few issues, so I picked one up. I wasn't sure. I was a little afraid it was going to be kind of like a Jeff Johns Superman story, which I find really bland. Like I like Jeff Johns, like most of his writing's really cool, but when it comes to Superman, it's basically just very one-dimensional, like, you know, saving cats from trees and smiling kind of thing, you know. So I was kind of half expecting this story to be like that. It just kind of a very safe, like feel good type story, but it is not. There's a lot more to it, and I found myself really enjoying it. It's written by Joshua Williamson, who he did Dark Crisis, pretty sure. The most recent Dark Crisis. But I really like where he's going with this. He sets up a whole lot. Like it's not just like a fun little one-shot type story. It's setting up a lot. Like the whole issue, he's hearing Lex Luthor from prison talking to him. Like Lex Luthor knows he can just like talk to him from his prison cell, and Superman will hear him. But he's basically trying to say to Superman, like, you know, we need to work together. You need to accept my help. And Superman's trying to ignore him. And this issue introduces a really interesting concept, what I don't think any other Superman comic really has, where Superman puts on music and uses music to block out a lot of what he's hearing, because his super hearing, like it's just like kind of overloading him. So there is a flashback where he's a kid and he's doing the same thing, playing music really loud so he can kind of focus more on what he wants to hear. And they show current day Clark doing that at work. He has like headphones in and he's trying to block out Lex Luthor, which I thought that was actually pretty cool. And I really like Clark in this. Like, I feel like kind of going back to Jeff Johns, and like, I feel like the Superman run before this, like Superman Rebirth, like some of it was super interesting, but a lot of the comics I read, they were making Clark really like that super bumbling version, kind of like an all-star Superman, which I'm not a huge fan of. This one, like Clark feels, you know, like an actual person, but he's not an idiot kind of thing. So I did like that. And Lois Lane is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet now. I found that interesting. And also Superman ends up going to LexCorp because there's like this big like whirlwind, and it turns out Lex Luthor basically left the entire company to Superman, and he's turning it into Supercorp, and he basically wants all these assets. He basically wants to make like this huge conglomerate, you know, based around Superman. That's supposed to be like, you know, a world protection type company, and Superman
Incorporated.
And Superman doesn't want it really, but Mercy Graves, who's giving him the whole spiel, is like, I mean, I'm pretty sure like if he gives it up, like everyone just kind of loses their jobs. Like
Right.
Lex made it pretty apparent. Like if Superman doesn't want it, then the whole company is going to be dissolved.
Mhm.
So Superman isn't really sure what to do with it yet. But then like there's something he sees that makes him rush over to Lex Luthor
Mhm.
in prison, but he's stopped by Parasite. And
Mhm.
then the issue ends with like actually like this whole swarm of parasites
Oh.
coming and attacking Superman, and you're not really sure where those came from.
Mhm.
And it also ends with Lex Luthor saying to Superman, like, "You're gonna need my help. Like, you're not fighting your villains anymore. You're fighting mine," or something like
Mhm.
that. And kind of suggesting that some people from Lex Luthor's past are
Interesting.
um, going to be a threat, which I find pretty interesting because I feel like
Mhm.
there's been so many Superman villains be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I just found the whole concept really intriguing.
Mhm.
But there was one thing that I really liked in this issue. There was kind of like a uh, kind of a presentation of
Mhm.
the concept of Supercorp,
Yeah.
and the Superman they showed in it was very clearly the Superman from the 1990s animated series,
Right. Right.
which I thought was really fun
Mhm.
because that's kind of like my childhood's Superman.
Right.
Yeah, and that is that. So actually, a really good issue. I'm probably
Yeah.
gonna continue with this series, and if there's
Cool.
like
Cool. Cool.
a cool arc in there, we might cover it on the show.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, so what was your cultured pick this week?
Yeah, for this week, I picked All Out Avengers #1. I think it came out in like August or October of last year. It's a really interesting series. It's kind of this every issue is like a fight scene with the Avengers, but it's like a different roster of Avengers each time. And at the
Okay.
same time, they all kind of tie together too. So it's like so in the first issue, like they're fighting, it's this roster you see on screen right now, and
Yeah.
Captain America is like, "Wait, how did we get here? Like, what's happening?" So it seems like there's like some kind of a force that's manipulating them, almost like they're action figures or something like that. It's
Hmm.
really interesting. I haven't read
Huh.
that many issues in this series. I don't think I only read one or two, but it's
Yeah.
really interesting. Like they're just in an action scene every issue, and no one knows how they got there. So
Huh. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think I've actually heard of this until you mentioned it. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's pretty
I
cool.
might have to check those out.
Yeah.
But that is the end of our episode for
Mhm.
this week. This has been TCN Presents The Cultured Pull List. If you would like to support us on Patreon to help us bring you more content, check us out at patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show specific tier if you would like to support our show specifically. I have been your host, Michael Malillo. My co-host has been Luke S. Our logo was designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by me. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe, that really helps a lot. Scan the QR code on the bottom left to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media. And scan the QR code on the bottom right to check out me and Luke's other brand, Casual Experts, on social media, YouTube, and our other podcast. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.